Hi all. Thank you for joining. I am just as a brief introduction about myself. I'm Dr. Arati Kanchi. I am working as medical director at Amgen. And I have been in industry for many years and, have been working in clinical trial development and drug development. Have been part of multiple indications, including oncology, autoimmune diseases. And in recent years, my area of interest has been in the rare diseases. And that's why, I have been, there are like of course there is a science part, but when we are doing these trials, one of the significant challenge we all face in any clinical trial is recruitment. But when it comes to rare diseases, I experience that even at like very significant level, and that's I wanted to take this opportunity to present some of the challenges what I have personally faced and how we try to mitigate it. And also, based on the overall the past experiences and systemic review. So thank you for joining again. So my talk will be about recruitment in rare disease clinical trials. What are the barriers and what are the opportunities in this space? Um, Okay. So just to begin with, what is a rare disease? So rare disease, I think most of you might be already aware. The name, as it suggests, rare disease is rare. But what exactly, when we talk in terms of number, rare disease is a disease or condition that affects less than 200,000 people in the United States. An orphan drug is a drug which is used for the treatment of the rare disease or the condition. Now, in the US, over 7,000 rare diseases affect estimated 25 to 30 million people, and this is only for the US number. Many conditions, in the rare diseases are still untreated, and they are serious and life-threatening. And that's, so many of these diseases still lack the research and effective and approved treatment in this space. So the clinical trials in the rare disease, that's why are very crucial because there is really a big unmet need there in this space to find the treatment, for these patients who really don't have any treatment options. And then, when we are performing, and again, based on my experience, when we are doing the clinical trials in the rare disease space, recruitment becomes a big challenge in this space. And if you see the literature also, you'll see that there are considerable number of trials which have failed or they were significantly delayed because of the recruitment issue. So coming to the main topic of the discussion, what are the key barriers for the recruitment in this space? And this kind of something similar to what other clinical trials are there, but because of the rare nature of the disease, you'll find some additional, more significant barriers in this space. So rare nature of the disease, of course, the first and foremost, and we'll go in details of each and every one of them. So I have tried to bucket them in 6 different categories. So as I mentioned, rare nature of the disease. The next one is the lack of awareness and understanding of the disease. And it is somewhere related to, again, that rare nature of the disease. Then the complexities of the trial design, or what challenges you face when you are designing the clinical trials in this space. Also, the complex regulatory approval pathways, again, specifically for the rare diseases. Nowadays, one of the challenge I myself has faced is increasing competition between the sponsor companies, and I'll come to that later. And last but not the least, the big challenge we all see in many clinical trials, including the rare diseases, logistical and operational hurdles. So coming to the first barrier, which is a rare nature of the disease. Again, we did see the definition of the rare disease. This disease, again, you'll see very small number of the patients across, which are geographically dispersed across the globe. So it's very difficult to go to a one small region and find enough number of patients for your trial. So you have to go globally across the world to find these patients. And one another thing you'll find in this disease, rare disease space, is the heterogeneity of the disease and the population is very high. So it's very difficult to find, when we try to find a homogeneous population, it becomes even more challenging in this group of the patient. And of course, again, with the rarity of the disease, you'll find the less availability of the specialized sites across. So you'll have very few sites which are actually specialized in treatment and taking care or diagnosing these diseases. um, Again, because of the lack of the research, we do see that lack of available treatment options. There are a lot of off-label use, but those are not approved treatment for these patients. And, because of the longer duration of diagnosis, lack of availability of the treatment, many times by the time the patients, are at the specialized centers or, considered for the enrollment of the clinical trials, the patients are too sick. And, many times they need to be excluded because of that reason from the clinical trial. So what are our opportunities here? One of the thing is the rare disease patient registries. These are extremely helpful registries for many diseases. I won't say that it's available for all the diseases, but many diseases these registries are available, and when it is available, we need to make sure to use them for the quick and efficient identification of the patients, and also to match the patients based on the age, gender, and specific disease characteristics. They're very helpful. And of course, I think another thing is to try to maintain these and even create the patient registries for the diseases. The second most important thing in this space is the patient advocacy groups. So the patient advocacy groups play very significant role in for this patient population. So these patient groups have large network of the patients. They have extensive knowledge about challenges with this population overall, and they really play a significant role in educating the patients and also building that trust with the patient population for even the drugs or the trials. So we can use the patient advocacy platforms, to disseminate this information or, even putting that word across to the patients and build that trust with the patient population. So that relationship with the patient advocacy groups and partnership is very crucial when we are doing the clinical trials, and it needs to be established from very early days when we start designing the clinical trials. And in today's era, of course, the use of the social media, we can effectively use these social media platforms because there are multiple patient groups. Patients are very active. Their caregivers are very active in these groups. So even to increase the awareness of the disease about the drug or the trial within the regulatory constraints, we can use these platforms, to benefit for the patients and also for making everyone aware of the trials. Coming to the second point of lack of awareness and understanding of the disease, again, you'll see for the rare diseases that there is limited existing knowledge. There are not many studies. I'll come to this point again for the natural history disease, or again, there is a limited data available. And overall, the expertise in the fields are limited. So many primary physicians are not experts in treating or diagnosing these diseases. So you'll find, limited number of researchers with the required experience and training are less in this field. Also the specialized center and the infrastructure, what we need maybe for the clinical trial and assessments of the endpoints, it might be, lacking in this space. Again, as I mentioned, because of all these challenges or like lack of awareness or education of the diseases, many times you'll see a patient by the time they reach accurate diagnosis, they have already met, at least 3 to 4 different physicians. And by the time they come to a specialist center or meet actual, get diagnosed, it is a long period of time, and it's approximately 4 to 5 years on an average. It may, maybe many more years than that by the time they reach the accurate diagnosis. And that's another challenge, that by the time they reach, they already passed that early phase of the disease. And you will see many of these trials will need the early, patients in the early stages, because that's where the therapeutic interventions may really help with the patients at the early phases. So what are the opportunities here? So I think one important really thing here, is about the education of the scientific, population and the physicians and clinicians about the diseases, and overall the availability of the different measures of the treatment and diagnosing tools in these communities. So which can help, overall in reducing the time of diagnosis, disease recognition, or even referring them to the specialist centers in time. And we really need to ensure to expand and strengthen these training programs for the rare disease research. And when we are looking for one of the specific trial, this is something we need to keep in mind. Maybe we can start working, reaching out to different, engage with the physicians, researchers, and patients also. Maybe congresses, conference, different meetings, one-on-one meetings. We have also, one of the things we have done is, connect with the field medical personnel in the company. There are, the sponsor company many times have this group of people who have relationships with the physicians, and, train them about the protocols and diseases, and they go out and talk to the, overall, this is an opportunity to educate and also the spread of word about the clinical trials, which has, I personally have found it helpful in this space. So the complexities of the trial design, this is another, which is very important, I feel, is when it comes to the recruitment, because the trial design plays a very significant role and we really need to pay attention when we start developing a clinical trial or clinical trial protocol. So what are the main, challenges you face? So in rare diseases, you will find there are many times, lack of predefined endpoints. And this is very important because we do need these primary endpoints for the approval of the drug. And because that there are lack of clinical trials or overall research, you'll find these predefined endpoint we really need to establish sometimes. Then again, as I mentioned before, there is a limited understanding of natural history of the disease. Then the traditional randomized double-blind trials, typically they need larger sample size, and they will need a placebo control arm. And it becomes challenging, especially if you see the pediatric population when we are taking, or very senior population, the parents or the caregivers are concerned about the placebo group, and they really are not willing to be part of the clinical trials. And also of course, the rarity and high inter-individual variability. And I mentioned that these disease groups are heterogeneous, and, this is one of the significant challenge when you are designing the protocol, and you are, want to ensure that you can enroll the patient population what you are looking for. So the opportunities here is one is, of course, is identification of a novel and meaningful and quickly achievable endpoint. So, the discussions with engaging with all the experts in the field, the regulatory authorities, and this is should happen in very early, of course, in the protocol development, to find those endpoints. I mean, believe me, based on my experience, this is a challenging task when we are designing a protocol, and also try to come up with a surrogate endpoint because those are typically quickly achievable. But of course, we need to make sure that those they are scientifically sound. So many times you'll find there are some established endpoints like histology, which includes the invasive procedures, and that again may impact the recruitment rate of the trial. So thinking about these endpoints is very important, and discussing this with regulatory authorities is very crucial. Um, then again, because of the heterogeneity of the population, when we want to have some homogeneous population to have that valid or meaningful results in the trial, we need to enrich the study population, and this is something we have used in our clinical trials. Enrichment based on the disease area, you need to find these enrichment criteria for the population. And again, discussion with the key opinion leaders and researchers is very important here. But at the same time, when you are enriching the population, you really want to make sure that you are not restricting the population a lot. So keeping that balance is also again important. So just to give an example, I had one trial where, we really thought initially that, oh, we are enriching the population really well, but soon we realized that this criteria are so restrictive that it's very difficult to recruit this group of population, and we needed to make some changes, to balance that enrichment against the restrictiveness of the criteria. Then use of the adaptive trial designs is another, I think, a very important consideration. We really need to think beyond the traditional designs while we are doing, sample size, maybe use sample size re-estimation technique, adaptive phase 2, 3 designs, bucket or basket trials. These are important because these are, help with the limiting the sample size required for the study. Then allowance, I talked about the placebo-controlled trial. So allowance of the standard of care, is, I have seen personally, very effective tool in improving the recruitment rate. But what we can do is allow it with certain limitations because it's one of the confounding factor in the clinical trials. So, based on like only certain medications and with specific duration, stable doses. If we allow, that helps, bringing on more patients for the investigators. We do need to have, more natural history study disease studies available. And if it is already there, we can use as external controls, or we can also think of running the natural history parallel studies when we are designing the trials. Platform trial, this is another newer concept which is coming in the clinical trial space, and it's existing there, but you'll see that in happening in the rare disease. One example is the Conquest trial platform in the systemic sclerosis indication, where this they use a common placebo control group, and there are two different arms in the clinical trial where two sponsors can use their products or their drugs, but they can use a common placebo group, and they can utilize the same protocol, which really helps with, that sample size because you're pooling the placebo group here. And last but not the least is the incorporate, patient-centric approach. This is very important. Focus on patient and family needs when you are developing a protocol, and incorporate that in very early stages of the protocol. And this is really important, and we see that benefit, of it when we do the recruitment or we execute the protocols. So the fourth challenge is about the regulatory challenge, the regulatory complexities. So the complex regulatory landscape, again, as I mentioned, when we are doing these trials, we have to go globally. There are variety of course, nowadays, regulatory authorities are have developed new regulations to promote the research in the rare disease, but these regulations vary country by country, and we need to go globally. So there are inter-country variations. So requirement of in-depth understanding of these regulatory requirements is very crucial. And we need to make sure to collaborate with, the specialized CROs who have experience in all these regulatory pathways. They can navigate through all the challenges of regulatory pathways. We also need to collaborate with multiple regulatory consultants or experts, or again, just having a CRO with who hire these experts. This is my personal experience about the, competitive drug development landscape. And we did experience that with one of my trial where, when we initiated the trial, there were not much, drugs out there, but over a period of time, there are multiple drugs started announcing that trial. And it became a challenge, to recruit the patient because there was increasing competition. And one thing you'll see when there is multiple trials going on, once one patient goes in the trial, there are open label extension studies and long-term commitments. So the patient gets engaged in that trial for a long time, and then, there is a less availability of the patient pool. So, one thing what has helped us is engaging with the key opinion leaders again and investigators, meeting them, trying to understand what issues, they are facing. Can we ease their burden? One message one of our key opinion leader used to give in our trial is, because we are coming to the end of the clinical trials and other trials were starting to recruit, let's just finish this trial, try to get the answer for this mechanism of an action, and then we can focus on the newer trials, just to, have that, basically make it more efficient. And also we can think of expanding to the sites and investigators, to the regions where with the less competitive research. Then there are logistical operational hurdles, which is always, the case with the clinical trials. Again, we do need to go globally. There are multi-country logistics, and patient and site burden is something, really a big hurdle. When we start executing the trials, we really understand that how important it is that not to burden them. And this again falls in that trial design. And also when it comes to the competition with the other trials, these things really are helpful. And we do need to collaborate with, again, specialized experienced CROs. We can provide, certain reimbursement, travel reimbursement, stay reimbursement to the patient and caregivers. Again, this is all within the regulatory constraints. From the COVID era, the home healthcare visits has really gained the popularity and really is very helpful tool whenever it is possible in the trial design or trial visits. And we really, when designing the trials, we need to make sure that there is a flexibility on the study visits. We need to limit on the invasive procedures, and make sure that sites are not burdened and patients are not burdened, because, like, of course, we need to make sure that the scientific integrity and the answers what we want, we are getting, but wherever possible, we should make sure to reduce that burden, because that's extremely helpful when it comes to the recruitment part of the study. So just to summarize, again, rare disease space is not, paid a lot of attention. There is a limited research, but it has gained popularity. And like, nowadays there is a lot of motivation to start the research in this field. Again, recruitment, there are multiple challenges, but the recruitment, I feel, is a key challenge for the successful completion of the clinical trials. And when we do, there are multiple stakeholders, the CROs, key opinion leaders, investigators, patient advocacy groups, sponsor companies. We really need to collaborate together, because eventually the goal of, all of us is to bring that medication to the patient and reach it as quickly as possible for, these serious and life-threatening diseases, and improve the quality of these patients. These are my references. So thank you, everyone. Please let me know if there are any questions.